Hello and welcome to BYJU'S classes. In this session, we shall discuss about the decision of the United States to withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal, or also popularly known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. It's abbreviated as JCPOA, and we shall evaluate the fallout of this decision on US-Iran ties and as well as on India. With this decision, the Trump administration has been seen as a deal breaker. The United States, under Mr. Donald Trump, has previously walked out of two other international arrangements. One is the Paris Agreement under the Climate Change Convention, and second is the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or also known as the TPP. And now, considering that the US has again walked out of another international arrangement, that is the Iran nuclear deal, the United States is being termed as a deal breaker at the international level. Now, in this session, we shall evaluate the impact of this decision of the US. We shall talk about the consequences as far as India is concerned, and we'll try to get an overall picture about the impact on the Middle Eastern politics with regard to the Iran nuclear deal. So let us begin by getting a background into this topic. In 2015, Iran, the P5+1 countries, that is the UN Security Council members, and Germany. This grouping is called as the P5+1 countries. The 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, which includes the United States, Russia, China, the United Kingdom, and France, plus Germany, they form the club known as P5+1. Along with the P5+1, the European Union and Iran, they had signed the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in the year 2015. And this brought the Iran nuclear crisis to an end. As per the deal, Iran had to scale back its nuclear weapons program, and in return, the United States and European countries, they would lift the stringent economic sanctions which had been put in place to cripple the Iranian nuclear program. This agreement in 2015 had prevented a possible conflict between US, Israel and Iran, and it had brought stability to the volatile Middle East. In fact, Iran has pursued the development of nuclear weapons since the 1980s itself. Iran considers nuclear weapons as a strategic asset to deter its regional rivals such as Israel and as well as Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia represents the Sunni power bloc, whereas Iran, on the other hand, represents the Shia power bloc. And naturally, Israel is also a hostile partner for Iran, and Iran considers both Israel and Saudi Arabia as an imminent threat in the Middle East. So this brings Iran in direct conflict with the United States as well, because the US considers both Israel and as well as Saudi Arabia as very close allies. And along with this, Iran's history of backing anti-Israel and anti-US terror groups such as the Hezbollah and Hamas. This positions Iran as a principal rival of the United States in the region. Iran, being a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, or also popularly called as the NPT, Iran being a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, its pursuit of nuclear weapons is actually violative of the NPT provisions. And it is believed that Iran has been assisted in a covert manner by countries such as Pakistan, China, and even Russia. The US believes that Iran's nuclear program has been covertly assisted by Pakistan, China, and as well as Russia. So this is the reason why both US and Israel, they have been targeting the Iranian nuclear program since the last few years. They have used a variety of methods to halt the Iranian nuclear program. They have employed covert action, they have carried out sabotage, and even implemented a wide variety of economic sanctions in order to arrest the Iranian nuclear program. In fact, the targeted assassinations of key nuclear scientists, and the use of Stuxnet virus so that they could remotely sabotage the nuclear centrifuge facilities in Iran, and even plans of carrying out airstrikes against Iranian nuclear facilities. All these acts by US and Israel, they had raised the banner of an imminent conflict in the Middle East prior to 2013. Before 2013, it was believed that there was an imminent war between the US and Iran, or between Israel and Iran. So this hostility came to an end only with the signing of the Iran nuclear deal in the year 2015. So during this crisis, it was the European countries, including UK, France and Germany, which played a key role along with the UN Security Council, the European Union and the International Atomic Energy Agency in diffusing the tensions and bringing both US and Iran to the negotiating table. Finally, in 2015, the Iran nuclear deal was signed at Vienna, which is the capital of Austria. This is where the International Atomic Energy Agency is headquartered. So in Vienna, the Iran nuclear deal was signed in 2015 in order to contain Iran's nuclear program by imposing restrictions on 3 domains. Please make a note of this. The restrictions were implemented with regard to the uranium enrichment facilities of Iran, with regard to the centrifuge facilities which Iran was operating, and as well as heavy water facilities which Iran had established. Because these 3 areas are absolutely critical in the development of nuclear weapons. You need uranium enrichment plants, you need centrifuge facilities, and as well as facilities to process heavy water. So these 3 critical areas of nuclear weapons were targeted by the Iran nuclear deal of 2015. According to the treaty, Iran was supposed to pass the additional protocol of International Atomic Energy Agency in the year 2023. This would mean that Iran had to comply with IAEA provisions, and it should open up its nuclear facilities for inspections by the International Atomic Energy Agency, so that its implementation of the nuclear deal could be monitored by a unbiased, neutral international player. In return, the US and European countries, they agreed to lift the harsh economic sanctions which had been imposed on Iran. So this deal was considered as a landmark achievement by the Obama administration, but Donald Trump has always been a critic of the Iran nuclear deal. He believed that the deal was one-sided, and he has criticized the deal since the days of his presidential campaign, which began in the year 2016. And he had vowed to withdraw the United States from the deal once he was elected into power. So this is a promise which Mr. Trump has lived up to. So let's talk about the reasons based on which the US government has decided to walk out of the Iran nuclear arrangement. Trump's criticism of the Iran nuclear deal is largely based on 3 points. Point number 1, the fact that the current deal only limited Iran's nuclear capabilities for a fixed period. And second, that the sunset clauses, which are a part of the agreement, they impose only a limited restriction on uranium enrichment and stockpiles until the year 2030. So this would mean that Iran would still be dangerously close to acquiring nuclear weapons at the end of these sunset clauses. The second reason is that the deal does not stop Iran from developing ballistic missiles, which, according to the United States, threatens both Israel and Saudi Arabia. The Iran nuclear deal doesn't cover ballistic missiles. It doesn't prevent Iran from developing ballistic missiles. And the third point is that both US and Israel, they believe that Iran is still running a covert nuclear program which has been kept outside the purview of the International Atomic Energy Agency. So these are the 3 grounds on the basis of which Trump has decided to pull the United States out of the Iran nuclear deal. This is despite IAEA's assurance that Iran has been 100% compliant with the provisions of the deal. And as a result, the US has invited widespread criticism from across the world against this decision to walk out from the Iran nuclear deal. Now let's look at the reactions of global leaders that have been pouring in after the decision of the United States. First, let's talk about Iran. Iran has hardened its position after the announcement by the Trump administration, and the Iranian president, Mr. Hassan Rouhani, has warned of severe consequences, and he has demanded that the other signatories to the deal, they should uphold the promises without succumbing to US pressure. He is essentially talking about the European countries which are a part of the deal, that is the United Kingdom, France and Germany. He's also referring to Russia and China, which are the other two countries which are a part of this deal. And Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, he has said that Tehran would quit the landmark 2015 nuclear deal unless European signatories offered solid guarantees that the trade relations would continue even after the US withdraws from the nuclear pact. In fact, he has called for a revival of the nuclear weapons program. He has asked the government to walk out from the nuclear deal and begin the nuclear weapons program in violation of the non-proliferation treaty. This has been the reaction of the Iranian government. Now let's look at UK, France and Germany. These three countries, they have played a very important and a constructive role in finalizing the deal, and the three leaders of the respective countries, they have tried their best in the last few weeks to dissuade Mr. Trump from walking out of the arrangement. The three leaders, they have expressed shock and regret at the decision of the United States, and at the same time, they have promised to uphold their commitments and continue dealing with Iran as their companies have significant stakes in Iran's economy. Now, if you look at Russia and China, both the countries have criticized the US again. Both Russia and China have said that the American decision threatens peace and stability in the Middle East, and they also believe that the decision of the American government can affect the talks which are going on between US and North Korea as far as the nuclear disarmament process is concerned. Now let's look at Israel, Saudi Arabia, UAE and Bahrain, which are considered to be the regional rivals of Iran. These countries have in fact welcomed the decision of the United States. They have welcomed the US role in rejecting the disastrous nuclear deal which was signed in 2015. And they have even called for reinstating the economic sanctions against Iran. So this has been the stand of these countries which are opposed to Iran and its nuclear weapons program. And finally, if we look at India, the Indian government and the Ministry of External Affairs, they have reacted in a very cautious manner. India has asked all the parties which are involved to engage in a constructive manner and to resolve the issues peacefully through dialogue and diplomacy. And India has stressed that Iran's right to peaceful uses of nuclear energy should be respected, and at the same time, the international community should show a strong interest in promoting nuclear non-proliferation. This has been India's primary concern. India expects that the global community upholds the principle of nuclear non-proliferation, and at the same time, India wants the global community to respect Iran's right to develop nuclear technology for peaceful purposes. Now let's discuss the fallout of the decision of the United States. The first and foremost impact would be with regard to stability in Iran and in the Middle Eastern region. Iran will feel cornered by the US, Israel and Saudi Arabia axis, and this could force Iran to actually pursue nuclear weapons at a much faster rate by walking out of the deal. And Iran could also support the ongoing conflicts in Middle East, be it in Syria, be it in Yemen, or be it in Lebanon, and as well as in Palestine. Because in these regions, Iran is seen as a very influential player. It backs a number of terrorist organizations such as Hezbollah and Hamas in the region. And this could lead to greater instability in the Middle East. And also, the hardline factions and radical elements in Iran, they will be emboldened against the Iranian regime because these radical elements, they were always against the Iran nuclear deal. They did not want the Iranian government to enter into negotiations with the United States in the first place. So these radical elements will be further strengthened, and this could create greater instability and it could wreak havoc in the entire region. Second, the oil markets could be destabilized because Iran is one of the largest suppliers of crude oil, and any instability near the Strait of Hormuz, can cause significant damage to the global economy. The Strait of Hormuz is a strategic choke point which is located near the Persian Gulf, and any impact or any volatility in this region will directly affect the global oil prices. And the looming threat of reimposing US-led economic sanctions along with new penalties, it could dampen the oil markets and affect Iran's trade relations with major oil importing countries such as India, China, Russia, and even the European countries. The third impact could be with regard to the nuclear disarmament process which is underway with North Korea. In fact, the recent historic peace process between North Korea and South Korea, which is being mediated by the United States, this process could suffer because the North Korean regime will be looking at the failure of US to remain consistent with its international obligations. And these developments in Middle East would push North Korea to reconsider its offer to negotiate the nuclear disarmament process. Finally, let's talk about the impact of this decision on India. Trump's decision to withdraw from the nuclear deal will have major ramifications for India. In the past, India has been caught in the middle of this crisis and has been forced to walk a tightrope to ensure that its ties with neither the United States nor Iran is affected. So the first impact would be on oil imports which India is making from Iran. India is the third biggest consumer of crude oil in the world. Iran is the third largest oil supplier to India as far as 2017 is concerned. Let me put this down. India is the third largest consumer of crude oil in the world, and Iran is the third largest supplier to India. So this clearly makes Iran a very important partner for India, and if economic sanctions are brought back, then India will come under the US pressure to drastically reduce its dependency on Iranian oil once again. This would be very similar to the sort of pressure that India had faced in the period between 2008 and 2013. During this period as well, when the Iranian nuclear crisis was going on, when tensions between Iran and US was at its peak, India was being pressurized by the United States to cut down its oil supply from Iran. So during that period, the US brought huge diplomatic pressure on India to scale down imports from Iran and even forced India to abandon the Iran-Pakistan-India pipeline project, or also popularly called as the IPI pipeline. Instead, the US encouraged India to take up the TAPI pipeline project. The US asked India to abandon the IPI project because it included Iran, and instead asked India to take up the TAPI pipeline project. While India conceded with the IPI pipeline, it could cut back oil imports from Iran only to a certain extent. Because India was very much dependent on Iranian oil, and also India didn't wish to affect its strategic ties with Iran. Hence, India worked out a number of alternate arrangements to pay for Iranian oil in order to bypass the economic sanctions. This included making payments in rupees as well. Now, if the economic sanctions are imposed again, India will have a very tough choice to make, and it will affect India's energy security as oil imports might get expensive due to the volatile situation in Iran and as well as in the Middle East. But on the positive side, Indian companies can actually leverage the tougher situation that the Iranian government would be facing, and India could negotiate better bargains which are favorable towards India, and this would be a major win for the Indian companies. Since many countries would be backing out from trading with Iran, India could use this as a leverage to strike favorable bargains with the Iranian government. Apart from this, India's connectivity projects, which includes Iran, might also be affected. For example, India has given a major push in the last 8 or 10 years over very important strategic projects. The US decision could also affect the connectivity projects which India is involved with Iran. The signing of the Iran nuclear deal had actually helped India in pushing the strategic Chabahar port project, which is very crucial to India's ambition of connecting with Afghanistan, for connecting with Central Asian countries, and as well as with Europe. Along with this, the International North-South Transport Corridor, or popularly abbreviated as INSTC. This is also a connectivity project which includes India, Iran, and Russia. So all these connectivity projects, including the Chabahar port project and INSTC, could be affected because of the economic sanctions. Because the United States would expect India to stay out of the arrangements which are dealing with Iran, so that the nuclear program of Iran could be crippled. Apart from this, there is also the specter of China entering Iran even more aggressively. This is a move that would haunt India and ensure its choices would get even more restricted. Essentially, increased US pressure on New Delhi to downgrade its ties with Tehran would not only impact Chabahar's future and bilateral trade, but it will also derail India's carefully calibrated West Asian diplomacy. The Modi government has so far been successful in enhancing its ties with Iran, Israel, and the Arab states simultaneously. Even though all the three have differing objectives, the Modi government has somehow struck a fine balance in the last few years. And this is partly because the Iran nuclear deal had reduced the tensions between the Western countries and Iran. So the US withdrawal from the deal will directly affect India's West Asia policy, and it will require a well-calibrated strategy to balance our energy and connectivity interests on one side and our relations with Iran, US, Israel, and Saudi Arabia on the other side. In this regard, India will be hoping that European powers will keep supporting the deal despite Trump's opposition, so that the impact on India will also be manageable. In conclusion, this is a development which is bound to affect India's foreign policy choices significantly. And hence, this would be a very, very important topic for UPSC exams, especially in your mains, because you can expect analysis-oriented questions on the lines of what we have discussed in this session. I hope this has been helpful. Thank you. Thanks for listening.